natural instinct impels us to defend ourselves. We don't want to die, and we do want to fight for our life. However, when I see one of our brother catechists attain such heights of maturity, unable to harm anyone, whilst all around him he sees machetes and people without scruples ready to carry out a sentence and kill him, yet he does not turn away but chooses death. That for me is the pinnacle of holiness.
Estimates put the number of dead in Mozambique's 11-year war of independence that finished in 1975 and the subsequent civil war that erupted shortly after and raged for 17 years at over 1 million people. An additional 3 million were condemned to a refugee existence. As Portuguese colonial rule slowly came to an end, and also under the Frelimo Communist Party regime and its conflict with the Renamo guerrilla, the persecution and violence affected also Christians. Many missionaries were expelled or left the country because of the fighting. The few remaining local priests had to take their place, whilst many scattered small Christian communities were entrusted to the care of lay catechists.
Lest we forget, this was a time of war. The situation was very difficult. People were afraid to leave their homes, uncertain of whether they would reach their destination. There was a constant feeling of danger. The catechist visited missions regularly. He brought the Holy Sacrament to communities. He was also responsible for catechizing, training catechists, preparing Sunday services, because the liturgy of the Word was celebrated in communities that had no Holy Mass on Sundays. It was a life of many sacrifices, travel difficulties, hunger, material privation. They received no pay for their work.
Cipriano Parite, a Mozambican from the Macua tribe, became a catechist during the war. He was born in the north of the country in the village of Napano into a Muslim family. He was, however, sent to a Catholic school at a mission in Huayra. In 1957, around his 15th birthday, Cipriano receives baptism and with time manages to inspire his family to the faith. On returning to his village, he begins to look after the local community. 10 years later, he marries and has 7 children.
He's got a family, he has to take care of everything, above all to raise his children. His community also needs him. He celebrates services, gives catechism, takes an interest in family problems. In addition, he also has to attend courses, travel, often ends up being away for a whole week. That is a life full of sacrifice.
On the day of our church wedding, he was already working for the church in the community, together with his friends. He used to obligate his colleagues to visit the poor as well as to help the needy, distribute fuel to those that needed it, help with work in the fields. They used to discuss these things during their meetings. He had a very good understanding with our children. He often had conversations with them. He would gather them round and talk with them with great calm about the catechism and school, always about these 2 issues. We used to pray together, morn, noon, and night. He would bring the children together, and then we would go and pray together, after which they would all go to bed. He woke the children very early in the morning, so that we could all pray together. Afterwards, each would go to do their duties, and he would also leave the house on one of his many journeys.
He never quarreled or had any problems with anybody. I never heard him argue about anything. He was the kind of man who knew how to talk and be understood by everybody. My brother was very calm, patient and good-humoured. He lived a good life with his wife. His whole life concentrated on agricultural husbandry, exactly so as in the case of most of us, to have enough to put in the pot for oneself, the wife and the children. He was a hunter, used to catch forest animals in his nets, as well as pheasants and other birds. He also practiced a dance called erenkeia. He organized dance evenings that people liked and to which they would come in the evening. Cipriano's life revolved around the catechism and the land.
Cipriano, as a catechist, tried to be close to the people and their problems, to talk about the gospel in their language, understandable for everyone, and encouraging everyone to live a life of faith with faithfulness, in spite of the war, hunger, and the difficulties that Christians had to confront. The Macua diocese, in which he lived and worked, lies on Mozambique's northern seaboard, where Christians live the life of a minority amongst an overwhelmingly Muslim majority.
Muslims inhabiting the seaboard are somewhat more aggressive than Muslims of the interior. Muslims inside the country, where I work, are simple people. We cooperate, we meet, we never quarrel. Whereas on the coast, there is a tendency to pick on people who have different beliefs. Many Christians complain that when they meet for Sunday prayer, small groups of Muslims also gather and insult them, call them names and mock them. They make noises especially, hinder processions. One senses a bit of religious intolerance in all this. The area in which Cipriano grew up lacked tolerance. Cipriano was a man with a good heart. He was never against Muslims. He did not fight Islam. He never antagonized Muslims, and there was not a single Muslim who would fight against him. All baptized into one body. What does that mean? A clan? You say clan when you become baptized. After all, we know that there are many clans. Amulima, Alukasi, Asaleje, Amulaponi. Which of these is Jesus Christ's clan? None. He does not have his own clan. He is present amongst all nations. He came for all, without exception.
Mr. Catechist, I have a certain problem. There are very few of us Christians who go to church. Our neighbors laugh at us, saying that we haven't the faintest idea of what we are letting ourselves in for, that we will neither get to know God or see Him. What are we to do? There are many people who, having heard such things, back off and no longer go to church.
You should strengthen your faith and continue to walk down your chosen path, even if they mock you and laugh at you, because every man must be strong and defend his faith. He should press it to his heart, even when others come out against him. Are we ready to give our lives, as did Jesus, so that everyone might live?
It shortly became apparent that Cipriano would be given an opportunity to answer that question. In spite of the armed conflict, Cipriano continues to catechize unceasingly. By 1982, when the situation becomes even more challenging because of the famine, he takes up his family and moves to the district of Matibane. He immediately organizes a Christian community. He leads prayers, catechesis, and strengthens the people during the difficult time of war. On August 28, 1984, Renamo guerrillas come to his village in search of Frelimo party secretaries and militia. They ask a certain old man who is the party secretary in the village. He answers Cipriano and led them to his house. Cipriano denies the claim, but also refuses to give the name of the real secretary or militia members, knowing that they would face a certain death if he were to do so.
The man who led them to Cipriano most definitely thought that by denouncing the most famous and most liked person in the village, he would save his own skin.
Then came a very dark night, and I noticed the guerrillas coming down the road. They were walking towards our house. I quickly ran home to tell my father about this. Daddy, there are very many of them, and they are on the road and coming in our direction. It was still very dark, that one could safely escape. Father said that we would not run, and so we stayed in the house. When they came asking about the secretary, he told them, I don't know any secretary or any other boss. I don't know anybody, even though he knew them all, and some of them were present there.
Cipriano said, I cannot say who the secretary is, even if others charge me with making false statements. I followed them together with my brother-in-law. They gathered us together, set us down in groups, and began to question us. Do you know this man? I answered, I do. He is a catechist. Then they asked Cipriano, who are they? He answered, they do not belong to the militia, and they haven't had any training. I belong to the militia, and the other one also belonged to the militia. Had he exposed us, we would have been killed there and then. If he had only revealed the secretary, he would surely have survived. He very well knew who the secretary was, because he wasn't unknown. In fact, he was very important in the area. Had he confirmed that we belonged to the militia when they asked him, that would have been the end of us. We would not have survived. Everyone fears death, but he was reconciled with it.
Então, os guerrilheiros
At that moment, the guerrillas make a very radical choice. Seeing that they have been misinformed, and Cipriano has refused to hand over the wanted men they were looking for, the guerrillas decide to kill both of them. When he sees that everything points to him losing his life, he asks for a moment to pray. He wants to ask God to strengthen him at this most difficult moment. The guerrillas agree. The other one, Swati, a Muslim, also uses that time to pray. Cipriano goes inside the chapel and prays, not a few meters distance from everybody else. When he finishes praying, he comes outside and rejoins them. He came back and said, "I am ready now. You can do whatever you want with me." They told him, "Now lie down on the ground." And then they began to beat him with their machetes. I see him as a man with exceptionally strong faith. Had he been a person without faith, like me, he would have immediately delivered all the militia members into their hands. He would have indicated all of them one by one, and yet he did not do so. Where did all that strength come from, enabling Cipriano to accept such a terrible death? His murder was barbaric. That strength comes from faith. That witness came from a communion with Jesus Christ. Jesus of the Gospel said, "No man has greater love than that he should lay down his life for his neighbor."
The man who had betrayed Cipriano survived the guerrilla attack. Cipriano died on the spot from the machete wounds. He was 42 years old. In spite of the passage of time, people continue to remember Cipriano. Every year, on the anniversary of his death, the inhabitants of local villages gather to honor his memory. A holy mass is celebrated. Catechists receive a special blessing. Poetry competitions and sporting events are organized, as well as theatres in memory of Cipriano's life and death.
Sometimes, when a person is alive, people around them do not notice many things about them. Whereas, from a life and death perspective, that strong sign that he showed us dying as he did, in place of others, we begin to see his whole life anew. Everybody comes to the commemoration. No one is missing. Everybody participates in all the activities, and only then do they return home. Of course, Muslims also take part in everything. All of us Muslims believe that he was a man with a very good heart. He sacrificed his body, his life, to save other people, exactly like Jesus Christ, who gave up his life and died to redeem all mankind. He did exactly the same. Wherever we appear, people say, "Look, those are Cipriano's children." When the public view the performance, my heart breaks. I become sad, for I remember it all. It all comes back. And yet I appreciate that people continue to come to the Mass and the presentation, and that they do not forget, and keep the memory alive. I was a small child. I remember very few things, but these celebrations make me happy. I am very sad when I think about this whole injustice that they did to my father. On the other hand, I am glad, because so many people remember him. They reminisce about him, though he wasn't well known, was poor, owned little, did not drive luxury cars, was not a famous star. Yet since his death, everybody remembers him, and that makes me very happy.
Cipriano died nearly 30 years ago. Why is it then that people continue to remember him? Who was he for them? And who is this modest catechist from the Macua tribe for them today?
Many people say that so many have died in this terrible war, but Cipriano's death was completely different. He stands in God's presence. God himself surrounded him with glory. Nothing like this has ever happened before, until Cipriano. Never before. I have never heard of anything like it. Signs of veneration for this hero appeared spontaneously. Speaking in human terms, he was a hero. A hero in the religious understanding of the word is a martyr, a saint. That is what we desire. That Cipriano be declared a model for people of the faith. That he should be elevated to sainthood. That is how we see him. We already regard Cipriano as the patron of catechists here. We have thousands of catechists. People see catechists as their brothers, examples to be emulated. On the other hand, it turns out that saints did not appear from nowhere. They did not fall from the sky, that they are our brothers who lived on this earth and suffered the same problems. Cipriano was not an angel that appeared amongst us. We know where he was born. We know his family. His wife, thank God, is still alive. His children will, God willing, live for many a long year. He is our brother who is becoming for us, for our local church, an invocation, so that we might grow. I want us to evangelize in a way that enables local Christians to see that it is possible to live a life according to the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that it's possible to strive for sainthood and idealism. When I think of Cipriano, I ask him to pray for me, from the place where he is now, so that I do not waver from following the right path, so that I walk as a Christian and learn how to live among my community. There is nobody else I can lean on. If ever I waver from the right path, may he guide me back. I do not want to walk the wrong path. May he help me achieve this. With all my being, all my joys and sorrows, I ask Cipriano, who died without reproaching anybody, who wanted nobody's death, I ask him from the bottom of my heart, for my heart to be converted, as was Cipriano's heart, who died in order that others might live. Cipriano is for me, as are all saints, a provocateur, That is who they are. People who God has chosen to stand on our path and provoke us, to catch our attention. I regard this lay catechist, I, a consecrated priest, as a personal challenge to my faith.
Fica uma provocação na minha fé.
He, mature to such a degree as to be prepared to offer his life, be prepared to forget about himself, and to cease to fight for his life at all cost. He was capable of all of this.
Poder abrir os horizontes assim.
For me, personally, he is a holy Christian.
Santo no sentido da vida cristã.
Meu povo, rezem e não se cansem de rezar, pois eu estarei sempre presente nos vossos corações.